I've had my Steam Deck for a little bit over a year, and in that time my Steam library and pile of shame has grown exponentially almost. As you can see by the channel, strategy games are kind of my jam, and I already made one video on strategy games that you can play on Steam Deck, so why not revisit that with a whole bunch more and a couple of friends along the way. So let's play a lot of strategy games on Steam Deck, whack them into a tier list so that you know which ones are worth picking up and playing if this is your only gaming option, or even if it isn't, should you play them on this at all. Before we get into the list, just know this is the OG LCD Steam Deck. As I said, it's about a year old. I think I got it in August of last year, so it still works perfectly fine. Unfortunately, otherwise I could upgrade it, but this isn't the better thing with the OLED and the bigger battery and stuff. So all the mentions of battery and things just add about 20 to 30% conservatively, and you'll probably be about there for what it'll perform like on the OLED. Performance should be pretty much the same. The only difference this is I put in a 2 terabyte mini NVMe thing, so I have more storage, but it doesn't make any difference to performance or battery, anything substantial at least. So this should be very similar to what you will get on your OG LCD deck. And I suppose that brings me to criteria. I'm going to be judging these games on 3 different criteria. First of all, controls. How well does it play on deck? You know, you can connect this thing to a keyboard and a mouse and play it like a PC, but at that point, I'll just play it on my PC. This is how these games perform on the deck as Gaben intended. Secondly, battery life. How long can you play on the deck without being sat next to a wall so that you can charge or take a lot of battery banks with you? The longer you can play these games on a single charge, the better they're going to score. And lastly, performance. How well do they perform on deck? What's the FPS like? Is it stable? Does the game look good? It's all well and good if the game looks beautiful, but if you're getting 1 frame per second, I won't really call that playable. And the same thing, if the game is getting 60 frames per second, but just looks like one amorphous pixel, then it's probably not an optimized playing experience. And also I want you to know that I just planned this video as a fun video to do my birthday, which is technically yesterday when this video comes out, so don't wish me happy birthday. You missed it, all right? It's fine, get it next year. But 2 things happened. First of all, Steam released the 3.5 update, which allegedly increased performance. I haven't really noticed anything, but anyway, I thought, you know what? I'll go back, I'll re-record because they made the performance view even better in 3.5, so I'll go back and re-record stuff so you have better data on screen. And all of the recordings, I got them on the deck, could see them, moved them to my external SSD, could see them there, I was like, brilliant. Moved them to my PC, they're gone. They're not on the deck, they weren't on the drive, they were just gone. So that was great. So yeah, you're gonna get a mix of clips from pre-3.5 and post-3.5 because doing them again, this video would just not come out. So sorry about that. But I'm, this close to a mental break today, so I just thought I'd give myself that one. So a like would go a long way into giving me some sanity and hold the meltdown at bay for just a few days more. Anyway, this intro is longer than War and Peace, so let's kick things off by throwing on the games I've already reviewed on deck since I talked about them. Let's just move on very quickly. First of all, Warm 3 runs like dookie, battery life is dookie, controls, they're not too dookie, can technically play Total War on a controller, but during battles, especially with the low frame rates, you're really going to struggle to give all the orders that you need to. I actually reinstalled this on deck to see if anything had changed, and it wouldn't even launch this time, so do not play Warm 3 on deck. I mean, you shouldn't be playing Warm 3 anyway, let's be honest, but definitely do not play it on deck. I'm begging you. F tier. Stellaris. This runs impressively well considering you have a literal galaxy in your pocket. The controls are acceptable, of course, this is a real-time strategy game. Thankfully, you can pause, so you can technically do everything, but Stellaris is a lot of menu-based things. It's very fiddly and clicking. The on-screen mouse, I'm not entirely used to it. I'm coming from PC and general controls don't really use the touchpads all that much, so it can be quite fiddly, but once you get used to it, you can definitely play Stellaris this way. It'll probably just take you a lot longer than it would to play on a PC. Also, I did try to relaunch this after 3.5, for some reason it wasn't launched along with a couple of other games, so I don't think that's anything to do with the game or the Steam Deck. I think that's just a weird 3.5 bug with this version of Stellaris. Hopefully it'll get ironed out fairly soon. But still, if you can get it up and running, it actually runs pretty well. B tier. Bloons Tower Defense 6 runs buttery smooth, up to the point that any mortal PC can't handle it. The battery life handles just great, you can get tons of time out of this. Balloons pop into light all day long, and controls, they're just fine. You can either use the touchscreen, the touchpads, the analog sticks, whatever you want, you can do it. You just place towers, you press next run, and it just goes, baby. Perfect. S tier. Civ 6 surprisingly runs very, very well, reaching 6 if you really, really wanted to. Controls are more on-screen mouse, so a little bit fiddly, and with all the menus that are in Civilization, it's a lot of stuff to really granularly control. And again, some of the Stellaris you can't play, but it'll probably take you 2, 3, even 4 times as long, at least until you get very, very used to the controls. Battery life is also pretty decent, even better if you turn down the frame rate, so nothing to complain about here. A tier. And lastly, we have Faster Than Light FTL. Obviously, runs pretty much perfectly. This game is a beautiful little indie, requires no power. You can literally run it on a graphics calculator. It is perfect to run on deck. Controls are again a little bit finicky, but you have the pause button, and all the UI is fairly large, so clicking on things is very, very simple to do. And besides, if you need more time, just pause, especially in combat. take your time, baby, just pause. Battery life is also great, enough to complain about it. You can play for hours and hours and hours. You'll probably get bored of the game before you run out of battery life. That is just how long this lasts. Other than the controls, there is enough to complain about here. A tier. So on some new games, and I thought I'd kick things off with Realms of Rune. Recently just came out last week. Look, I literally just reviewed this game, so if you want to know my full thoughts about the game, I'll put it on the screen, I'll link it, it'll be somewhere. But just know that the game is good, not great. Fingers crossed that they do some of their Frontier post-launch support and it becomes even better because they're quite good at that sort of thing, but we'll have to wait and see for now. But the game that we have here right now, surprisingly, is actually pretty great on deck. Now, I don't know why I'm so surprised, because a lot of the things that people complain about is because they technically developed this as a also console game, which some people took to mean is really simple. I don't know why PC players have such a high opinion of themselves. I mean, I never leave this room. Anyway, the controls here are actually pretty decent now. Again, nothing is as precise or as easy as PC, but here, when you go through the tutorial and you figure out how everything works, it is actually pretty easy to get the hang of. And then once you do get a hang of it, you can play this game fairly optimally, even against the fairly aggressive and fairly skillful AI. Obviously, if you go online against PC play, you're probably going to struggle. Against the AI or on the campaign mode, you can really do a lot and keep up just fine and play this game no problems. Controlling large groups of units can be a bit fiddly and selecting all their abilities, and especially in the heat of combat with no pause or even slowdown, it can be a little bit chaotic, but once you get on top of it, you can easily play this game without many problems. Now, initially it felt like the game was running a little bit slow, so I did do a few tweaks of settings. I probably should have mentioned, when I'm going performance, I'm just going by, I load in, the game automatically detects what settings I should be at and leave it at that. If it's really bad, I'll go in and tweak some things, but for the most part, I'm trying to leave it as out of the box as possible. You know, just launch the game, it runs, how's it running? And here it wasn't great, so I had to turn it down a little bit to medium. Once I got it to medium, you were hitting a stable-ish 40 FPS. Sure, there were some dips when there's a lot going on the screen, but I mean, that happens on PC, so you can't really complain. In the end, I managed to settle on a steady-ish 40 FPS, which is just fine for me, because that's what I play most things at on the deck anyway, and you're pretty much maxing out your frames at that point. Now, battery, you're looking at the standard 2 hours maximum of the Steam Deck. Now, I say the standard, it's standard when you're playing something that's demanding. If you're playing, like, you know, fast and light stuff, obviously you can get way more than that. But powerful, demanding games that are pushing the Steam Deck to pretty much the absolute limit, 2 hours is pretty much all you get, and here, that is the case. So if you plan on playing this one, I would definitely keep a power bank or a power cable handy, because you'll probably need to charge up after every couple of missions or so. Now, overall, while the game may not be super duper S tier, the Steam Deck implementation of it is pretty good, so I'm going to put it into a fairly nice B tier, I think. I was thinking about A, but no, B, I think that's just perfect. Next up, we have Balers Gate 3, and yes, I know what you're saying, it's not technically a strategy game, but those battles are kind of like turn-based strategy, so I'm including it besides, you know, everyone wants to know how it runs on deck. And if you haven't played this game yet, by the way, it's the winner of every single game of every single year award, you're really missing out. And if you haven't played it, is the Steam Deck the platform to play on? Now, if you have any other way to play it at all, and I mean, if you got a good PC, if you got a PS5 or a Xbox, if it ever comes to that, you know, fingers crossed they say they're going to do it before the end of the year, I would highly recommend playing it on that over the Steam Deck, purely because it's just better. Right, so let's go through the good first. The controls work just fine. You can play this entire game on a controller. As I said, it has been developed to be on PC. It's released on PS5, so you control it with just controller on PS5, so you control it with just controller right here, and it works just fine. Is it as easy as the PC controls? No, not even close. But that being said, is any game as good as it is on PC? Not really. Now, performance, you can sort of maybe hit 30-ish FPS semi-stably on medium settings. It's not the most stable 30 ever, but it is playable if you're not super picky about frame rates. And this is a slower, more narrative-based game, and the combat is all turn-based, so there's nothing that you're gonna need to super duper react to, so having a high frame rate isn't really the end of the world. But still, if you are bothered by something running at sub 30, you're probably gonna have to deal with that for quite a lot of this game. And speaking of performance, while you're playing at 30, the game is not gonna look great. Now, this is not the best looking game of all time, but it is a very, very nice looking game. It's beautiful to look at. Max out on your PC. Oh my God, it is beautiful. Anyway, maxed out on PC or PS5 or whatever, this game looks gorgeous. On Steam Deck, it does not. It's kind of like you see a beautiful Tinder picture and then, you know, you swipe right, you meet, and I turn up. It is perfectly playable. If you're not super duper bothered about it, then yeah, you can play it on Steam Deck and you know, you're getting the same game technically, it just doesn't look as good. But if you can play on literally anything else, I'd probably do it on that because it's going to look better, it's going to run better, it's going to control just the same, if not better. And yeah, battery life, obviously maxing out, 2 hours, absolute max if you are lucky. Nothing else to say there. It's the minimum that you get out of the Steam Deck, and it's the maximum that you can get out of Balers Gate 3. It's just how it is. Look, this game is verified. I highly disagree with that because while technically it does run, you're pushing the Steam Deck to its absolute limit. You're pushing the battery to the limit, so you get the least battery possible. You're getting the least amount of performance I would consider acceptable, and the controls are just fine. So I'm going to put it into a C tier. Yes, the game is undoubtedly S tier, deserves all those Game of the Year nominations, but the Steam Deck version, I wouldn't call it verified. I'd call it playable and in a C tier on this. Now for a semi-related game, because it's also about dungeons. I'm not sure if there's dragons in it. Anyway, Darkest Dungeon. Now yes, I know there's a second one, but first of all, I haven't played it. And second of all, from the reviews, it's either similar to this game or worse than this game. So I'm going to stick to the original because it is like one of the most legendary, well, technically strategy games that exists. And for good reason. It's very good. This isn't one of those verified that gets you 15 FPS like Balers Gate 3. This is verified at solid at 60 no matter what is going on. Unless you're in like a loading screen and things are popping around and you know, you're just getting those frame drops that you get because you're loading. This is locked at 60 pretty much the entire time. And of course, because it's all turn-based, you don't really need 6, so if you want to turn it down to 40, to get a bit more battery life, then you can definitely do that. But this performance as well, the game looks great. It's got an art style rather than raw graphical power. So it looks great no matter what you're playing it on, and as long as you know, getting the minimum amount of performance out of it, you're getting the optimal experience. And on the Steam Deck, you're getting that. It looks great, it runs great. At 60 FPS, you're getting around 3 to 4 hours, which is plenty of time to play this game. Probably enough to do a single run and lose because this game is brutal, but I'm not judging it too harshly on that. And lastly, as for controls, pretty much spot on. Once you get the hang of it, it's easy as can be to go diving through levels as fast as you could possibly ever want to go. The combat is nice and simple since it's turn-based. Just select your action, select who you can target on, bingo, bango, bongo. Nice and easy selecting items to use, keep people topped up and healthy, and it just works perfectly. This one is an easy S tier. You can get a ton of time out of the game. You can get a ton of time gaming it on deck. It's going to look great. It's going to run great, and it controls great. Absolutely built for the deck S tier game. Right, we're getting through a few games here, so I'm going to take a break and let someone else take over.
Hello, Monsters Abound here. COLONELDAMNEDERS has asked me to review a game for the Steam Deck. I didn't understand the assignment, so I'm here at 8 o'clock on a Sunday. I'm 3 wines in. I've got a list of topics written down on a notepad, and I can already see that I've misspelt tactical battles as testicle battles, so strap in, this could be rough. So I've picked Age of Wonders 4 because this is a game that I love playing on the Steam Deck. This game is great anyway, but on the Steam Deck, just being able to take that game with you wherever you go is great. Age of Wonders 4 is a turn-based fantasy game. The best thing about it has to be the customization, because there's so much you can do with your race, with your lord, with your map. Do you want to play big, muscly orcs who are barbarians being led by a halfling warlord? You can do that if you like, sure, yes. It's a bit out there, and potentially it looks like that scene from Malcolm in the Middle where Hal is walking down the street being followed by those big muscly bodybuilders, but you can do that if you want to. The range of different books which draw your faction in different directions and give you access to more abilities and units and spells is vast, and the workshop is filled with more of them. It's just amazing. Not to mention that you can also craft the map that you're playing on. You can take your faction, you can then take it to a world that is, I don't know, a desert world filled with demons, if you like, if that's what you want to do. It's entirely up to you. Now the AI is very competent, and this is where I get into trouble, because what I do mostly in a game is spend my time dicking about, investigating dungeons, clearing out monsters, gathering resources and building my little cities, and forgetting that, you know, I should be actually winning the map. The AI doesn't though. The AI is, even on medium difficulty, going to give you a run for your money. The tactical battles, or testicle battles, as I've written down here, are very good. The variety of units you'll be facing against is massive, and you can pretty much recruit all of these units yourself. There's krakens, there's ghost ships, there's giant monsters. It's great. It's absolutely fantastic. And everything is the number of times you sit there and go, what the fuck just happened? Because you've run into something you've never seen before, even though you're 300 hours in. It's so good. And that's why it's a one more turn game. You never want to put it down. You always just need to do that last thing. You just need to clear out that last dungeon, build that last building, kill off that last enemy army. Is it good? Yes, of course it is. It's amazing. You can't go wrong with it. And how does it play on the deck? It's got a controller control scheme. Now I will say that I think people that use controllers to play games are dicks, because it never felt right for me. But you can also use a touchpad. To be honest, I prefer playing games on the Steam Deck with touchpads pretty much all the time, because otherwise I'm constantly looking for which button to press. But there is a controller control scheme. All right, it's inbuilt. But if you prefer using the touchpads like me, it's pretty easy to customize that almost immediately. The battery life, I mean, the game is a big drawer of battery. You probably got a good hour and a half, maybe. Probably more if you turn down some of the settings and stuff, which I don't. But then I have a battery pack, so I tend to just plug that in and let it drain off that instead. This game is great, and on the Steam Deck you can just take it with you wherever you want, and that's what I love about the Steam Deck is being able to take these amazing games that you can just lose yourself in wherever you go, on like a boring family holiday or a long car journey. Age of Wonders 4 is brilliant, and now you get to play it on Steam Deck. Do it.
Thanks for that, Dad. I'm all recharged and ready to go again. What's this that I'm wearing? We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, Marvel's Midnight Suns. This is up there as one of the most underrated games to come out semi-recently. I was going to say this year, but it actually came out in December of last year, so you know, kind of sad. But honestly, I adore this game, and I do not adore being out of focus. Stop doing it. Now, I initially bought the standard edition on sale, of course, and then I played 1.99 hours, realized that I love it, refunded it, and then bought the Ultimate Legendary Edition as like the season pass because there was new characters coming out. And oh my god, am I glad. Now, let me state the obvious things about this game if you have not played it. The social interactions are wonky, they're awkward, the writing is cringy, but let me tell you folks, that just adds to it. This game is so charming. I mean, what other game can I go to book club with Blade, Wolverine, Captain America, Captain Marvel, and then, you know, my weird hunter guy who can look like an absolute freak? Anyway, the actual, you know, gameplay where you're in combat is also excellent. It's card-based, which I heard and thought, oh, that sounds kind of weird and boring, but then I played it and I was like, wow, this is addicting as hell. You collect cards at the end of each run, you make better cards, you take them out, especially for the hunter. He has a massive array of abilities that he can do, with all sorts of really cool animations. It's just a brilliant game, and I cannot recommend it enough if you haven't tried it. Sure, it can be quite expensive with all the DLCs and stuff, but if you catch it on a sale, it is definitely worth your time and money. I've played like 60 odd hours of this game, I absolutely love it. When I bought it, I didn't stop playing it until it was done. Now, the controls on the deck are fine, okay? They're not amazing, but they are perfectly playable. Now, as I said, coming from PC where everything's super duper precise, selecting the card and then selecting a target for it is way easier on PC, but still very, very, very doable on deck with the analog sticks. Just sometimes takes a bit more of precise aiming if enemies are really close together, if you haven't got quite the best camera angle to see everything. Everything requires a very insane level of precision, so it's pretty easy to play through. Most missions, no problem. The keybinds for everything are also super simple, so aside from selecting cards, there's not really much scouring through menus to select things. You just select time, redraw cards, play cards, etc, 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 all works seamlessly. Now, performance-wise, the game runs not great. For some reason, when it auto-detects, I think it puts on like the maximum possible settings, which it can technically run, and it looks fine for like the one frame that you get. So I kind of tweaked this down to about a medium, and it ran a little bit better, but still, you were looking at sub 30 FPS for a lot of the more exciting things on screen, and this is I mean, it's not the most pretty game in the world, but for some of the animations, you know, you want to see them in a higher FPS because they're pretty cool. Yeah, performance, not great. Battery life as well, you're pushing the Steam Deck to its absolute limit, so that usual 2 hours, you're not getting more than that. Still, I think this is a great game, perfectly playable on deck. You might just need to stay close to a wall and not be too much of a stickler about frame rates. As usual, if you can play it on anything else, it's probably going to be a superior experience, but if the Steam Deck is your only option, then you're still going to get a playable game and a very enjoyable game. Highly recommend it going into C tier. They are billions. This is another on-screen mouse affair, and the game plays surprisingly well on deck. Now, there are a few keybinds which you'll need to learn by default. For example, pause is A, which is very, very useful since you want to give orders very, very quickly and react to things super quickly to avoid, you know, being overrun by the billions of zombies out there in the world. Now, slowly expanding your base, moving your units around where needed is very doable here. With no small part to the very well-scaled UI, it feels like the UI is almost built for the Steam Deck. It's nice and chunky, but also not taking up too much of the screen, so you can see everything that's going on, but also do everything that you need to, no problem. Of course, the usual applies where it's better to play on PC, but most things are. Still, on deck is definitely playable. If this is your only option, you can definitely do it. As for performance, the game runs at a pretty much solid 60 FPS, sure when you get a massive town and there's billions of zombies on screen, it can choke even the beefiest of machines, but in the early game, to the mid game, it runs just fine, buttery smooth 60. As for battery life, you're looking at around 2 to 3 hours, so not quite on the, you know, bottom minimum, but not too much higher above it, but still the extra hour can be the difference between getting both sides of your commute or just getting one part of your commute and then maybe a lunchtime. Overall though, very, very surprised how well this one runs and how well this one plays on deck, given it can be such an intense game. So I'm going to pop it into a very generous B tier. Bomac Crew is one of those games I had in my Steam wishlist for years. I don't even know when it got there, but eventually I pulled the trigger on it when I got the Steam Deck, and let me tell you, cut to me at 4 AM, still playing it with a battery bank, burned a hole through my chest because I just could not put it down. I just want to do one more mission to get the next part for my beautiful plane and send it out into, you know, in Europe. What's that place left that the UK left? Anyway, the gameplay is so much fun with, I'm saying gentle strategy. I don't mean it's easy. I just mean that it's not the most intense strategy in the world. You know, the missions are, you just do this thing and then you just do that thing. There's not much decision making. You just do it and then react to stuff that happens whilst you're doing it. There's ever more challenging missions. You get all sorts of great progression by upgrading your dudes, upgrading your gear, making just the right plane for just the right mission, different loadouts depending on what you're going up against. It's just a great game and it's super addicting. Keep you in that loop of, right, finish this mission, get some more funds, get a better gun, take it out, see what it does, see what tweaks, see if I need more armor, see if I need to go faster. It's all just beautiful and so much fun. You cannot put it down. Don't get me wrong, the game can be challenging and very, very intense and require a lot of inputs very, very quickly. You will need to use that slow down time function if, you know, you want to stay in control of everything and retry some missions, but still, tons of fun, cannot recommend it enough. And controls on the Steam Deck are just fine. I actually tried to play this on PC because I was just that in love with it. And I was like, wow, this controls like ass. It's way better on the Steam Deck. I prefer it there. The performance, buttery smooth, FPS locked at 60, even when all sorts of stuff's going on. I mean, occasionally you get a dip here and there, but pretty much rock solid for almost the entire experience. And there can be a lot of stuff going on in this game, so the fact that it runs that well, it's pretty impressive. Now, yeah, it's not the most visually advanced game in the world, but it still looks great, cute little art style, all sorts of great effects for explosions and stuff. Battery life looking at 2 to 3 hours, so again, kind of in that mid-range of still pushing the deck pretty far to its limit, but not absolutely maxing out the entire way. You know, the fans, they are going, but they're not screaming like they are on some other games. This is an easy A tier. Now, Space Crew is basically the same game, but it's in space. For some reason, it never really clicked with me. I much preferred Bomac Crew than Space Crew, but if you're more into space, then you are World War II bombs, which is a very unique sense I don't think I've ever said before. Then you might prefer that, and it's basically the same game, runs basically the same, so gonna put it just one below into B tier, but that's pretty much just my personal preference. All right, I want another break. Anyone else out there, you know, got a game that they want to talk about?
Hey guys, Lionheart here, and today I'm helping rank Factorio on the Steam Deck. For those who don't know, Factorio is a game where you've crash landed on a procedurally generated world or planet, and your task as the sole surviving engineer is to build up a factory, gathering resources, refining them, building advanced processing lines, so that you can eventually build a rocket to escape the planet. And you have to do all of this while being beset by alien bugs, which over time, as you end up polluting the planet, get more aggressive, get bigger, get nastier and crazier, and it's quite a task to hold them off and launch that rocket. It's a game I've played a fair amount on PC, but it was one of the first games I actually loaded up on my Steam Deck when I got it, and I absolutely love Factorio on the Steam Deck. In fact, I would say the Steam Deck is my preferred method of playing the game, and it's also because of Factorio that I actually haven't played too many other games on my Steam Deck. It just fits so well, and there's nearly endless hours of gameplay that you can get out of it. You know, definitely check out a full Factorio review or some gameplay to kind of see what you're in for, but it's a really satisfying game to play. In terms of its performance on the Steam Deck, you can easily run it at 60 FPS very comfortably, and that doesn't really affect the battery life too much, which playing Factorio, you can easily squeeze 5 to 6 hours out of it, and if you probably lowered it down to 40 FPS, you could probably push it between 6 to 7 hours, so it's perfect for a longer trip. You're going on a plane or something like that. It's going to last you a good chunk of even a longer haul journey. In terms of the controls, when I first started playing Factorio on the Steam Deck a year or so ago, there wasn't a dedicated official control scheme from the Factorio devs. They have now released one, but it's always been a game which actually just kind of remapping through the Steam Deck's, you know, kind of powerful custom mapping software has always worked pretty well. And I now use the official template, but I've also tweaked a few controls just to kind of fit my own preferences. But it's pretty easy to set up. There are a fair few controls for kind of switching between different menus and getting build lists and your crafting lists a little bit easier to manage. But certainly through the early to mid game, you're not going to have any issues with any of that. So yeah, I think Factorio is the perfect game to play on Steam Deck. If you love it on PC and kind of thought, I just want to take all of this with me in an easy form factor, it's perfect on deck. And for me, it is S-Class. Factorio.
Thanks for that, Lionheart. By the way, if you want to find either of these delightful gamers out there, then they will be linked somewhere on the screen in the description. Really appreciate them because I asked people super duper last minute and these guys got back to me, so I definitely appreciate that. Thank you, boys. Anyway, next up, Iron Harvest. Honestly, pretty similar to Realms of Ruin, but the control scheme is just a little bit worse. Since Realms of Ruin was developed specifically for consoles in mind and Iron Harvest wasn't, that's to be expected. Selecting units feels a lot trickier in Iron Harvest. It's not as intuitive as it is in Realms of Ruin, but when you get used to it, you can definitely play the game, just not, again, as optimally as you can on PC. Come on, say the line, Bart. Visually, however, the game looks great, and I actually wrote here about when all the mechs and effects are going off, but then I realized that the only recording that I actually managed to salvage was the one of the tutorial where I'm throwing snowballs, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it, because honestly, mental break, this close, guys, this close. The performance was surprisingly also pretty decent. Now, don't get me wrong, you're not getting 60, you're getting 40, and if you're getting 40, that means that you're maxing out. So the battery life is also not great, 2 hours absolute maximum, but still, what more can you expect? There's a lot going on in this game, tons of units, tons of orders, tons of effects for every single unit, loads of abilities, all sorts of things are going on, massive mechs and explosions, oh my, and it runs. A very playable frame rate, looks good doing it, and yeah, 2 hours isn't the most time in the world, but you're getting 2 hours of a pretty great game, so just keep that battery bank handy. Still with less than ideal controls, mid-ish performance, and very low battery, I'm going to put this one into D tier. The game itself, definitely excellent. If this is your only option, then I highly recommend playing it on the Steam Deck. If it is your only option, but if you have anything else, like a PC, probably just play on that, you'll have a better experience all around. Frostpunk, one of my personal favorite games, probably ever. And how does it play on deck? Well, it is playable, though not exactly the preferred experience if you ask me. This entire game is city building that requires you to use a mouse, which means that we are back to trackpad and on-screen mouse clicking. Now, it does actually have some keybinds which were very useful opening the various menus, which I do appreciate, but I still found myself misclicking a whole lot. Now, I know to get used to it in time, but someone only really use the Steam Deck in like bed or on trips. I think I'd rather just spend my time elsewhere than learning this control scheme. But as I keep saying, if this is your only option, then yes, it is technically playable, at least as far as controls go. Now, visually, this game has always looked gorgeous, and honestly, on Steam Deck, it's no different. It's one of those games where it looks really great without having a whole bunch of detail, and on Steam Deck, it still looks pretty good. Right out of the box, performance-wise, I was getting 30 FPS, which is technically playable for a game like this, but you know, if you're getting 30 FPS, you're also maxing out the Steam Deck, so battery life, sub 2 hours is what you're looking at, so not too great there. As I keep saying, if you have no other option than the Steam Deck, yes, it's a playable frame rate, the battery life isn't great, but the controls are playable, so if you want to play Frostpunk and you have nothing but the deck, then it's definitely a very possible option for you to do it that way. But if you have a PC that can run it, then I'd definitely say to just play it on that instead. The controls are easier, and obviously you don't need to have a charger unless you suppose you've got a laptop. So this one will go into C tier. Promise at the end, I promise Star Wars Empire at War. Now, this is an older game, and older games are normally where the deck shines, provided you can get them running at all. And I'm very happy to say that this one is no different. This is pretty much my strategy game origin story. It's the first PC game I ever really owned. I have the disc for it somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where. I think it's in one of those drawers back there. But still, first strategy game I ever owned, and I absolutely played the ever-loving shit out of it. Now, the game looks as good as it does on PC, runs a rock solid 60 FPS. Even without dropping the refresh rate, you are still looking at nearly 4 hours of gameplay on this bad boy. And for a game like this, you have well over 4 hours of gameplay to enjoy. As for controls, there's no on-screen mouse affair, but there's a catch. Since this game was made for screens with less resolution than the actual Steam Deck itself, which makes me feel a little bit sick to actually think about, UI scaling by default is quite large. So on the Steam Deck, it actually looks pretty much normal. You can easily click on pretty much everything. One thing about this game, you can't zoom out a massive way, so selecting everything at once is a bit of a pain in the ass, but still, you can select everything on the UI, you can move units around, it is no problem, it works pretty much perfectly. Now, of course, blah, 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 not going to compete with PC, but still, very, very, very playable. I was super pleasantly surprised by this, and the UI, it just works perfectly because the UI is just so chunky. Besides, you're going to be against AI that was developed like 20 years ago, so you can probably manage. That being said, this game still kicks my ass today, so what do I know? Now, if you've never played this for whatever reason, you know, if you're below the age of 55, for example, then I highly, highly, highly recommend that you try it out on deck because it is a great little strategy game that you can get a ton of time out of. It runs super well, tons of battery life, the controls aren't bad. I'm putting it into A tier, baby. It could be the nostalgia speaking, but this one is a slam dunk for me. Creeper World 4. Now, the Creeper World series is a great series of tower defense games where you defend your base from an ever-increasing amount of blue alien flood. I think there is actually lore, but I don't know it. I think is the blue stuff called Creep or Creeper? It probably is. You know, I was just waiting for Minecraft Steve to arrive. Anyway, 4 takes the series to 3D, and on deck, it looks as good as it does on PC. These games aren't known for fidelity, so the deck easily presents the game as good as it can look, and it runs everything at a smooth at 60 FPS, no problem. At this 60 FPS, you're looking at 2 to 3 hours of battery life, so on the mid-range for this model of deck, So sure enough, it'll get you through 2 commutes in a lunchtime, as long as you aren't going like to the other end of the country and back every single time you go to work, which would be pretty sad. However, when it comes to actually playing the game, this is one that I just really struggled with. It's of course another on-screen mouse affair, and the UI just felt way too tiny to be clicking. I was misclicking all the time using on-screen mouse. It was such a pain. I couldn't select everything, and everything's placed on very intricate grids, so it was a real pain in the ass to put stuff exactly where I wanted it. Given this is all in real time, as all this sort of stuff can mean the difference between victory and defeat, and honestly, while there is a pause button, it's still not great, and it is going to take you way longer than it is on PC to play this game. If I hadn't completed this game and I scaled up the UI, I could see this being a permanent placement on my deck for some quick fun, but if I want tower defense, I'll probably just stick with Bloons Tower Defense 6, since it runs better, plays better, and generally is just a better game for the deck if you ask me. But still, I'm going to put this one into C tier. You can play it, but it's not necessarily the best experience in the world. And now final game, let's close out with another Frontier set of games. We're going with Planet Zoo / Planet Coaster. The Planet games are great park builders, so whether you're into roller coasters or exotic animals, you can build the park of your dreams with amazing levels of detail. Seriously, go on the Reddit pages for these games, and the level of detail that you see in some users' parks is actually insane. How exactly do these games hold up on deck? Not great. The little menus aren't exactly the easiest to navigate with the on-screen mouse. Building things can be a challenge, precise park building with paths, and even just the roller coasters, you can control it from the little thing at the bottom of the screen, but it's still quite fiddly to select everything and know exactly where everything's going. The control scheme isn't great for the camera. It's just overall a very fiddly and very precise thing that just doesn't really work very well on the deck, if you ask me. Again, it could just be because I'm not used to the on-screen mouse, and if I give it more time, I could get used to it. But initially, right out of the box, you are definitely going to struggle with this one. On the other hand, performance is actually pretty good. Not hitting 60 all the time, and once you get a big detailed pack, you'll definitely be dropping below what you would probably call acceptable playable frame rates. But still, by that point, you'll be mostly done building anyway, so it doesn't hurt to be a little bit uncomfortable while you're asking over your kingdom. Battery is also pretty poor, of course, you're maxing out the Steam Deck, so 2 hours is the absolute maximum that you're going to get out of this sort of game. Now, overall, it is all right, but unless you absolutely need a park builder, and you need it to be Planet Coaster, and the Steam Deck is your only option, then I probably wouldn't recommend this to you. Play on PC by all means, they are great games. If you want Park Builder on deck, stick to not this, D tier. While technically playable, far from a stellar experience. And I think that'll do it for today. Sure, there are more games I could add, but honestly, this video is running pretty long as is, and as I've said, I've had several mental breaks in the production. Yeah, I just kind of want to get this one shipped at this point. Let me know any strategy games that you're personally enjoying on the deck that I haven't mentioned, and I might follow up with an update to this video later on. Like, subscribe, and if you want more strategy gaming content, then why not check out this video to see my review of Realms of Ruin. Yes, twice in one video, but you know what? That's just how I roll.